Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however, emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident. Good day, and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Alison Lager. Alison began her career in mental health over 30 years ago. She founded Lager Counseling Services on the principle that too many people live their lives in an automated state and never deal with the systemic issues that keep them repeating the same lives they have become accustomed to hating. Being tired of traditional use of psychotherapy, Alison has differentiated her service from the rest. After being an influencer and sharing her knowledge on social media, Alison discovered the hidden needs of so many who did not have access to the kind of help they needed. They sparked her sparked her desire to create Alison Answers, a platform that includes podcasts, digital programs, and online therapy designed to awaken us all to our excellence with one goal: Mission Awake. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Alison. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Well, I love that introduction, Dwight. Wow. I could just listen to you like talk about me for a while.
my radio voice.
This is badass Allison here to take the stage. I'm here to make a difference. No, but anyhow,
Awesome.
Really. So tell me what you want to hear from me.
Okay, we're going to get into it right now. So one of the things you and I talked about before I hit record, we talked about so many things, but we talked about the origin story, and you noticed that I pretty much ask that all the time. Well, part of the reason I asked that is I've listened to so many podcasts in the last 4 or 5 years, and it really frustrates me not understanding the backward story of people's lives. And, no offense to other podcasters, they do things the way they want to do it. And I kept on thinking to myself, as a huge Marvel fan, Star Wars fan, they always started in the middle. And then years later, they start the origin and they talk about, it's all discombobulated. It's not connected correctly and there's no flow. And I decided when I do podcasts, when I finally start them, I want to understand the person's origin story, right from back to what you can earliest remember and move your way up to where you are today. Because, one of the key things from childhood to adulthood is, what steps did we go through? Were we bullied? Were we a princess? Were we, were we a type A student, an honor student, and it created this part of you as the adult you are now? Or were you a failure student, or were you bullied? You know what I mean? So I'd like to know more about your origin story. Like you and I talked about it, but the listeners obviously don't know. So tell me about your childhood to adulthood that led you to where you're at currently in your life.
I just want to tell you, Dwight, that I appreciate that question so much. And I'm going to tell you why, because I feel like you're like focusing on the whole person. And it's just interesting to me as a therapist, because that when somebody comes in with a current day issue, I want to know that current day issue, but at the same time, I find out their entire backstory, because it current day does not make sense. I mean, that's my whole mission anyhow. If you don't know the truth about what has been laid down your whole entire life up till now, I don't care what personal development you apply on top of that or what you do now, current day. If you don't clear out yesterday and any areas where you're stuck, you're really not going anywhere. So I'm going to answer your question, but I just had to say that because I love that. It's very, it's just whole, it's just whole health to me. But,
Thank you.
and as a therapist also, we're traditionally supposed to be blank slates, which I'm not, I don't even believe in that. So the idea of sharing your story and publicly and people knowing how you became who you are today is something that I've been like programmed not to do, just so as a background. And I'm grateful to do it. So basically from the time I was a little girl until all the way, I mean, most of my young childhood, I was neglected. So I did so much on my own. I learned how to just be in charge of my life because there wasn't really anyone directing me or guiding me. And it's funny because even when I was 7 years old, I was really young, and I just somehow, I don't know, somehow believed that there was a God and went to church by myself at 7 years old, walked 4 blocks to a church where I met 3 other 7-year-old girls. It's so funny. It's such a funny story, but, and it's
Okay.
an aside, I mean, I don't want to like totally labor on it, but what ended up happening, we were in this church for years. Like we got involved. I knew my way around the whole place. It was just like my home, and everybody knew us there, but we didn't have parents. It was like, wah, 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 like there was no parents, just us and all these other adults and children. And when we were 13 years old, I went into the church, and every person that had been there wasn't there. There was a whole different, this is the truth, I'm not kidding, it sounds crazy. There was a whole other congregation in that church. They moved and never told us because we didn't have parents there.
Oh my goodness.
So we never knew. So meanwhile, I'm like neglected at home. And this place that was like another home was like, and I remember going into the kitchen because I would like climb on the cabinets. I would go take things out. I would give things to people, whatever, if somebody said, hey, Alison, where's this thing? I knew where everything was in the church. And they were like, you can't be in here. I'm like, what do you mean? I can't, you know what I mean? So where I belonged, I didn't anymore. But that was just like that. I mean, that wasn't really something that was majorly traumatizing, but when I look at it in the whole big picture of, and I'm hoping I'm going to be able to like totally circle back to like whatever the heck my mission is, but the whole idea is like I was neglected throughout my childhood, and usually when kids are basically neglected, tragedy just shows up because there's no adult really managing things. So throughout my, I'm not going to waste all of your time on the whole of it because there's so many different things that happened throughout my life. But I was sexually abused very young, 4 years old, which then, each thing progresses and creates this neurological programming that teaches you your core beliefs, and so as I'm going through my life, I'm learning this, one thing is layering on top of another that is, informing my choices throughout my life because I'm developing these core beliefs, which are impacting the way I think, which are impacting the way I feel about myself. And then my results end up producing what those core beliefs are, and that's like the whole thing I do with therapy. But so if we progress on throughout my life, like I went to school, I had, all through school, I ended up actually quitting high school. And then I went back. And then when I went to college, I ended up getting a 4.0. I went to school for 8 years. And that all was great because through my drive, I had like this inner drive always inside of me. But within that drive, I also had this underbelly core belief that said, you can't have what other girls can have. You're just not that girl. You're not the girl with the princess bedroom. You're not the girl that, gets the whatever, who's driven anywhere by anybody. You're the girl who does it on her own. So that was became my thing, but it also was a strength for me. And what ended up happening is, as I'm succeeding on one end, I'm going to school, I'm getting a 4.0, I'm doing really well. And then on this other end, relationally, I was just getting into one really bad situation after another, because my belief system about myself dictated who came into my life. Because if I walked into a room, and I know the neuroscience behind it now, but if you walk into a room and you believe that you're not the girl who gets, you're going to get what's left. You're not going to see the great person over there. You're going to see the person who sucks, to put it mildly, because sucks isn't even a word that describes what I went through. But anyhow, so then as I went through my life, I was a witness in a murder trial. There's so many things that it's actually almost funny if I start to really it's not funny, but to me it's kind of funny, because I feel like it was all for a reason, an amazing reason. And I love that about my life. I really honestly do, because I had a fiance that committed suicide and I found him dead.
Wow.
That was beyond tragic. And after that, I developed an eating disorder. I was hospitalized, throughout and there's a lot of other things within those many years. But, I had one of my sons attempted suicide, and I had to take him to the hospital. I found him and had to have his stomach pumped. So it's all of these different things that happened. It was these experiences of tragedy and utter despair, right? And then this little whispering voice, this still small voice, deep inside, I always knew, no, you were born to win. And I knew it. If somebody I always believed that I could have the greatest thing, but you're not the girl who gets. You got to work so much harder than anybody else to get that thing. And then when you're right there, you're not going to get it. So it's a core belief. So what really trained me, I have all these years of academics, right? 8 years of academics. I study, I read every damn book you could ever imagine. And my real education, I just kind of came to understand that my real education was the repetition of tragedy, despair, triumph, tragedy, despair, triumph, repeatedly, building muscles over and over again. And and I remember saying to myself at some point, God, what is going on? Is this for a reason? Because I believe that everything is happening for me. You hear Ed Milet say that, but I've been saying that. I literally am not kidding, since I'm 7. I think it was just in me. I would always look there's got to be a good reason for this. I would always think that. And there was. And this is what I love about life. It's such a passion in me, because I feel single thing that I've gone through, I own now. That thing is people say that's my bitch. Well, I feel like that. I feel like I own that bitch. You know what? I own eating disorders. I know what it's like. A dead body. I've seen a dead body. Murder trial. I've been there. I know what it's like to be on trial. And you know what? It's all these crazy situations. And what I know what it's like to be hospitalized. I know what it's like to be in such a major depression that you want to kill yourself. I know what it's like to see somebody want to kill, all these different things. But what it did, people can sit in front of me and I own the land that they are in. So I can walk right in there with them and I know what they mean. So I feel like it's given me the most beautiful, precious gift to be able, because as a therapist, I'm going to tell you something, you hear some heavy, heavy shit. So basically, all of this shit that's gone on in my life, like I could go boohoo, this sucks. And I have felt that. But I learned, and it's taken me a lot. I mean, there's lots of times that I feel really badly, but I am positive. See, was what has brought me here right now, is that I've watched over and over and over again. So I have all these clients who come in and see me, and they see all the therapists that work for me. And I have these 2 counseling centers, right? And another one on the way. And like, basically, there's just people, and the stories are the same, but the situations are different. And I just zoomed out, and it's just, I feel like it was almost divine. I was like, oh my God. And I just saw a message. Like, I just feel like it is like my job, like basically it's like mission awake. Like the only way that anybody's ever going to get better, like we can apply all of these, like, oh, do your morning routine, say your affirmations, meditate, work out. I mean, I believe in every single one of them. I do them all. I believe in it. But the real thing is, like, to me, I feel like this is like a mental health movement. So basically, what ended up happening was I zoomed out and I saw that human beings in general are all automated. And just in the study of like neuroscience, and also through the years of doing therapy, if you look at like inner child work, they all match. Like science, spirituality, psychology, I just see them all merging together into like this basic idea that we are, from the time we're born with 100 billion neurons, and then we develop like more than this, but I'm just summarizing, like a quadrillion synaptic connections by the time we're like 7 years old, more like 1.5 quadrillion synaptic connections. And all of that is a meaning that this little child attached to every nuance that came through their 5 senses. And right there is where all these core beliefs are developed. And my core belief, like at that time growing up, was like, I believed that there was so much out there to have, but I just wasn't the girl to get it. So there's like a belief system. It's not, because shame was like my core primary feeling, like I was less than, I was, dirty, I was, but I could see the greatness, So I think so many people are living their entire lives wanting, yearning, longing, and you can do that all the way to your grave. And there's no shortage of people who are doing that all the way to their grave. And it just kills me to see that. So what I believe is that these core beliefs are running behind the scenes, just kind of like a landscape or apps running in the background. And the only way to know what your core belief is to know the truth about your life today. So like you're in finance. So like I have people break down their whole life inventory. So it's like, just tell me the truth. Tell yourself the truth about yourself financially. Like, what's the snapshot? Where are you? Emotionally, where are you? Spiritually, where are you? Physically, vocationally, socially, like your friend groups, who's your support, your relationships. And when I have people look at that and they see patterns, once you see a pattern, you're golden. Your life can change.
There's patterns in everything, right? There's patterns in what I do for the last 18 years as well. Right. It's consistent. The odd time I'm still pleasantly shocked. All right. Somebody will take me outside of that wheelhouse of where I think I understand what they do. And really at the end of the day, they shock me. So there is still that shock factor, not very often anymore, but you're right. There's patterns to everything.
Yeah. And so many people are like living a life they just have been automated to live like this. You talk about like living life on purpose, but the only way to live like life on purpose it's almost like I have this vision. I see it all the time. It's like, and I don't mean like a woo-woo vision, just I just see it. Like there's doors of opportunity everywhere, north, south, east, west, for everything. Opportunities to love, to give, to make money, just every opportunity. And then there's a big wall in front of it. And there's one huge door in that big wall. And I feel like that door is the door of truth, because like you cannot get anywhere if you don't know where you are. It's just
Well,
not possible.
you're exactly right. Even in my finance industry, if people don't,
Yes.
I do a lot of counseling, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. I get a, because I sit in a goal set with people, I break down their goals, and you find out so much about them. You find out about the fact of their number one stress in people's lives. Still, I don't care what people say. In my experience, number one stress is finance. It's
Yep.
the lack of money. And then
Mhm.
you can have people that don't have the lack of money, but they got the lack of time, or they got the lack of foresight to see the fact of what their money has, can do for them, how it can change their other people's lives. And they just keep on searching for more and more money, and yet they're never satisfied because they've never worked on the 6 inches between their ears. They've never helped understand the fact of the trauma of their childhood and dealt with it. They have, just like you were talking about, self-limiting beliefs. You talked about the fact of shame was really one of your controllers in life. Well,
Yep.
if you feel shame, you're not going to take on risk to
Mhm.
go and do other things because you're afraid you're fearful of more shame coming into your life, or embarrassment, which there's ties together between shame and being embarrassed. And we need to work on the fact, like, right from the fact from when we're children all the way up. And you did mention the fact of what Ed talks about. Things don't happen to us, they happen for us. But how the hell do you know that when you're young? It's
I know.
impossible to know that and get it. So the only thing we have to look at is what our associations tie to us, right? Our associations of what our parents say to us, who they associate with, what we hear them say and not do, right?
Yep.
So they're hypocrites.
Mhm.
They live hypocritical lives. We grow up being told, do what I say, not what I do. So there's contradictions. We grow up feeling, less than ourselves, when really our whole childhood should be about elevating us and moving us along a path of learning how to walk and talk, potty train. This is how you deal with stress. This is how you deal with people. This is how you communicate. All the different stages that we as adults don't get. And when we wonder why most of our population is controlled by the smart people that have figured it out, and the rest of the population is living on a hamster wheel, like I teach about, and they go to work, go home, get paid, and they have no hope. They go to bed like I did for a decade of my life in quiet desperation every night, because I didn't know how to admit traumas that I experienced in my life, how it affected who I was. And now what was I going to do to fix it on my own? And the biggest thing is getting rid of pride, and not having that proudness of, well, this is who I am. People are just going to have to accept it. But learning to accept the fact that I'm broken. And now who can I bring into my life to help me with my brokenness? And for me, most of my life, my brokenness has been, um, it's been able to be dealt with because of my belief in God,
Mm.
my faith in Jesus. And I'm, again, for those that are listening that are atheist, agnostic, believe
Yeah.
in nature, believe in whatever, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not judging you. For me though, my hardest times in my life, from my childhood of being bullying to health issues to going through divorce, raising 5 kids of my own, eventually as a single dad, all those things are a culmination of who I am and who, but I needed to be vulnerable. I needed to talk to people. I needed to get advice. I needed to figure out if that advice was actionable advice, that person that was giving it to me, it wasn't book taught, it was actually life taught. and now they were out doing that industry, or they're out being that coach or that mentor or that psychologist or psychiatrist. And that's another thing that is really tough in our world today. We have so many people that put themselves out as experts, yet they're book taught and they don't have any form of actionable life experiences to go along with their book taught, that make them into an overall person, like you mentioned, that can relate to their clients. I can relate to my clients because I've lived in quiet desperation. I've gone through divorce. I've been through financial strife. I've been through bullying and abuse. I've been through so many different things that made me, once I realized and put all those pieces together, made me into a better person in my industry. And I believe no matter what industry, you could leave what you're doing, but the person you've developed and becoming, you can take that and move it to any other industry. And that's what personal branding is to me. That's what
I totally agree.
we get to a point where we figure out who we are, and now we share that vulnerabilities. We start not caring about what other people think. We're looking for our like-minded tribe, whether that tribe is people we educate and study with, or that tribe is our clients and that are coming to deal with us. We want to only attract those that can resonate, that you can say something and they're not going to get butt hurt, or they're not going to be somebody that's an energy vampire, which we have way too many of them in our lives. And you're probably like me. You wish some of the stuff you knew today, you knew 20 years ago.
Oh my
Right?
gosh.
Could you imagine
So
what kind of warriors we could be if we could go back to our younger selves and take our
yes,
brains today and go boop?
that's what you know what? This is how I talk to myself in regard to that, because that drives me absolutely crazy. Because it's like, oh my God, if I just knew and then my voice in my head would say, oh, I wasted blah, 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 all these years. No, but I feel like this is what you and I are discussing, is that the value, like the value in those experiences could we couldn't be here without the years and the depth of the experience. It would not, we wouldn't be the same. It took that many years, it took 26 years to be, my overnight success was 26 years, took 26 years, it's like
Yeah.
30 years overnight success. But really, I believe that that's so true. And when we're talking about those core identities that are developed at so young, and then the way our brains work is that we will only draw in or allow in information that supports that belief. So it will keep us on a path until we become awake, until we see the truth that, oh, wait a minute, what I'm believing about myself. So much of the human race is moving through life with all of these thought distortions, all of these emotional addictions that they don't even know they have. And they're just following them. And we've learned that little voice inside that says, no, you're made for more than this. Like, you're made for greatness. Every one of us is made for, I always feel like, we're like snowflakes. Like, we are little powerhouses that we have no idea, if we just were in our excellence. I feel like the world has taught us to, and I'm not boo-hooing the world or whatever, but I feel like in terms of safety, our society has taught us to stay in the middle and never veer off. And
Society, though, is always trying to see. I refer to society and I talk about it. I call the society the committee of they, because everybody we talk to in the committee of they, our whole lives, they'll say, well, you should do it this way, or they do it that way, and this is what you need to do. They're trying to put us into a specific box of how we should be. And then that's why I feel associations are so imperative. And everybody thinks association is just about people. So you talked about the fact that we have these learned processes throughout our lives, and they keep on getting more and more ingrained. Well, our associations are what we let our children watch, what we let our children, listen to. And I tell people there's a reason why parent groups got together in North America and created these different bodies, nonprofit bodies that give ratings to music, to movies, to video games, because your mental mindset can only handle so many things properly and be able to accept it. And if you get things put into your head at an age where your mental mindset is here and the knowledge and the idea is way up here, your brain doesn't know how to cope, and it can scar you for life. And I get my own kids, they weren't allowed to watch things that had to be within their ratings. Well, such and such is only 2 years older. Yeah. And they're also more mentally mature than you. And I try to explain it. They get it now as adults.
Yeah.
They understand it. Do they all follow it? My 5 kids? No. They do whatever they're going to do with their kids. But I understood as a young parent that what my kids ingested into their brains was going to be what their thought processes were going to be as young adults into the future. And I didn't want that for them. And I was judged by people. Oh, I'll let them, even my own parents. Oh, I'll let them watch it. So what? They're 13. Who cares if it's R-rated? Well, I care.
Oh no.
You know what I mean? Oh, I'm serious.
Yeah.
I've heard that from not necessarily my parents specifically picking on them. I was just using an example of the rating system and how the rating system was designed to protect our young, fragile mind, right? And why women and men don't mature in their mindset 23 to 25, right? Women a little bit quicker than men, according to the studies I've read. But, bottom line, if our school systems weren't failing us and they worked in conjunction with our parents and the media worked in conjunction with everybody else, we'd have a lot healthier youth growing up. I see it getting worse, not better, because people romanticize and they live through shows like The Bachelor, right? And The Bachelorette, or, any of these fantasy shows, which are not necessarily realistic representation of how we live life. Or they watch a drama show, instead of treating that drama show or that cop show as pure entertainment, they get involved in the characters, and they allow what happens on these shows that are written by people to influence their thought processes. They bring that back to their family, to their work, to their jobs, and it's just back to that hamster wheel. We have very few people in this planet that are out standing on a soapbox saying our education system's broken, our governments are broken, family value systems are broken. People are just way too entitled. But anyway, I get on a soapbox myself, right?
No, I hear you. And you know what? It really resonates with me, because I feel like we do not, in order to understand the impact of all of these things, we have to understand how, if we're not awake, if we're not aware of what's coming in, and we're not, guard your heart, be aware of what you take in, or what thoughts even that are inside of your mind that you follow. Because we have, we've heard this 1,000 times, and I'm just going to say it because maybe somebody hasn't heard it, but we have, and the jury's out on how many thoughts we have a day, but 65,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. 91% of those thoughts are the same thoughts we thought yesterday. And we are literally following those thoughts are generated. The fuel that generates those thoughts are the core beliefs that are in our neurological makeup, and all those synaptic connections that we talked about are spewing out these electrical impulses, which are thoughts, right? And it's all interacting with we become addicted to the feelings that we feel the most. Because just like people become addicted to chemicals that come inside our bodies from the outside, the chemicals inside our bodies that are repeated, we become addicted to. We literally go through a withdrawal from depression, from anxiety, and our bodies will draw us back to the thing or whatever it is that will recreate that same feeling. So, and then we are literally need to be in charge and awake. So we know that this is happening. If you're aware of it and you can see it, you see that you feel your body pulling you back to an old feeling, or following a thought that where it's going to take you, the end of it, but it's so compelling to follow a victim thought, or a thought that is, I'm never going to get ahead, or I'm less than, whatever it is.
Self-limiting beliefs are prominent though in our
Yeah.
lives. Like, you talk about being until we become awake. So back to the association things, if we're associating with the same people, like they always talk about your 5 closest,
Yep.
contacts. Well, it's so much bigger than that, but it starts somewhere. People that are starting to become they're starting to become awoken, or they're awake now, or they're starting to feel that, I find they're it makes everybody else uncomfortable around them. So whether it's success in a career, success in whatever, it doesn't matter the case. Maybe it's just, hey, I'm kind of thinking this and wondering, that makes that person feel uncomfortable, and they're in your associations, they're dragging you back. Or you feel lousy and you go listen to depressing shit music that feeds that state
Yeah.
that you're in, instead of listening to stuff that's positive and uplifting to uplift your state. Maybe listening to a podcast, putting on a documentary. Maybe do like me, when I want to change my state, I like watching HGTV. I like watching home reno shows and stuff like that, because it's mind numbing. I don't have to think a lot about it, and I can, oh, that's kind of neat. You know what I'm saying? I find something that's going to change my state, but most people stay asleep and never become in that awake situation because they never change their associations. Nobody challenges them to change their associations. And if one person does, if their circle is greater than the strength of your energy, of what you're transferring to that person is greater, they're just going to swallow you right up, pull that person back, and they got an anchor on their shoulder again, and they never wake up. Right. And I've worked with tons of people, tried coaching them, and it doesn't, even the most intelligent people, you think that you could snap your fingers and they'd wake up. They're go to work, go home, get paid mentality, doom and gloom, entitled behavior, living in depression. And I try to teach them the difference between like my definition of depression and anxiety. Well, you say you're depressed. Tell me what you're depressed about. And in reality, what they're telling me is they're suffering from anxiety. They're thinking about the future and what's going to go on. And other ones will tell me, oh, they're anxious, and really it's depressed. They're talking, everything's about the past, what's happened and how they couldn't control it. And why did I let this person treat me like this? Or why did I have this faulty relationship? And they never become awake. They go back into, I'm that prime example, same type of women I've dated most of my lifetime, broken women that I wanted to fix. Right.
There you go. But there's your pattern.
I totally understand it, and I still get sucked back into it the odd time.
But I
And
have a philosophy. It's not even a philosophy.
okay, tell me.
It's actually just a thing. It's called family systems theory.
Okay.
And it's the idea that, and it's really cool, and I love to use it. So basically, just like we're scripted, we have these patterns inside of us that keep drawing us back to old behaviors, thoughts and feelings that end up in results that we're like, how the hell did I land here again? You think you're following a map to California, you have your map out, and you keep landing in Chicago, and you're like, what the hell? How did I get here?
Yeah.
What the, right? But it's because you're following a faulty map, which is your neurological system. But this is good. This is good for you too. All of us, is that relationships are scripted. So there's this thing that happens where, how if you're interacting with someone, you can actually have an argument in your head. Like, if you say something in your mind, if you say anything to this one particular person, you in your mind know the script, the back and forth, because you're in a pattern together. And this is what happens. People bond together in their brokenness. And when somebody starts to change and become healthier and leave that broken pattern, there's this cool, horrible thing that the other person does. And I just find it fascinating, is that they do this thing called the change back move. It's unconscious. They're not doing it on purpose, unless of course they are, but usually they don't even know they're doing it. So let's say you're the person, whatever it is that would make you do the behavior that you do in the relationship. Let's say you stop doing that negative behavior. This person, it could be a child, it doesn't matter who it is, they will up what they do in order to pull you back into that old behavior. They're not doing it intentionally, but it's because the relationship requires a homeostasis, like a baseline
Well, it's
where
their comfort zone. They want to get back to their comfort, whether it's a good comfort or bad comfort, it
oh yeah,
doesn't matter.
that's our body too does that. We want to, when people, I have clients when they start to, they move out of anxiety, they'll be out of anxiety for like 5 days, all of a sudden they'll have the hugest panic attack. And it's like, it's the rebound effect where their body overshoots to, because it's literally going through withdrawal from the chemicals of being anxious all the time. Because it's trying to bring you back to your regular baseline, which is higher when you're anxious,
So
respiratory.
do you see physical ailments come to light after people, or you're talking about that energy and how do you see them as they're charting to change and let go of that? Do you see that they are physically sick? Like, does it lower their resistant levels? Do they get colds more? Or are they all of a sudden telling you they're nauseous just because of all the changes that are going on chemically wise with them, with the
Well,
change of their 6 inches?
well, this is the thing. Basically, they can. There's a couple of things that can happen when people are not well emotionally. A lot of our bodies will say what we won't. So if people aren't being current with their emotions and what's really going on with them, if they're not living in the truth, their bodies will start to talk. So your body will say, will provide limitations for you that maybe you cannot provide with your words, or it's amazing what happens, and our body does what it's told. So if we're thinking thoughts we don't even know we're thinking about ourselves, our brain will deliver that, because our brain is a goal-driven machine. So it's going to give you what your thoughts are projecting. But I didn't really directly answer your question. So you're saying if somebody's in a withdrawal state, changing into a better place, could they become like feel ill in regard to it?
Well, yeah, feel ill, maybe nauseous, or maybe it actually evokes a fact that their resistance level is low because our brain, body, mind, soul connections all tied together. So all of a sudden they're decompressing and changing their chemical thought
Yes.
process. Does that weaken their resistance? Have you noticed that people all of a sudden that didn't get colds, or or maybe they developed a cold when you're working through them because they're not sleeping properly? Obviously, I guess the answer would be there would be some changes because it would affect their sleep patterns, not getting as much sleep. Maybe this new change is evolving them not eating properly and affecting their nutrition. So I could see it affecting so much more than just the chemical changes,
Well,
like with them being sad and depressed. So all of a sudden now they can see a light at the end of the tunnel and some happiness. I
well,
just see so many different things that can happen to them physically as well through that process.
I interrupted you.
It's okay.
I'm sorry. We discussed this before we went on, but
That's
I'm an
okay.
interrupter.
Go
Okay.
on.
I get excited about saying things. But no, to answer your question, it really depends on the person because everybody's so unique. But if somebody is addicted to emotions, let's say I ask people, what is the primary feeling you felt throughout your childhood? And depression and anxiety are two sides of the same coin. So anxiety is all future based, and depression is is in regard to the past. There's a lot to it. But so whenever I hear depression, usually they're intermingled. But whenever people start to leave a behavior or a feeling, or there's going to be pushback in our operating system, which is our body, which is going to say, alert, 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 you're changing. This is dangerous. Your change for our body means a lack of safety, right? So even if somebody's very overweight and unhealthy, when they start to lose weight, there'll be a pull from the body to go back to what the baseline weight was in order to maintain status quo, and baseline. See, and then you and I are talking about this larger macro issue, is that our the world at large is living in this mediocre middle state because it's a safe state. If I stay within these guidelines, if I start to spark and look a little different than you, I'm in a dangerous place. You understand? Like I could, and what that could mean is that I can be ostracized and maybe I won't fit in. But I mean, it's anything great is on the other side of discomfort.
Oh,
It's like,
absolutely.
I mean, it's just like, right? So it's
Mm.
like the idea of always being a novice is the place to be, like always reaching for that, learning something new, growing in this way. I'm totally trailing off.
Well, no, you're doing fine. At the end of the day, we just need to realize that life is always in session. That's not a dress rehearsal. We got to learn not to camp. We got to learn to climb more in life. And when you arrive at certain spots, and you talked about Ed, and Ed teaches is, he talks about the fact that you always, and he does too, you got to celebrate, but don't celebrate too long. People get to a point where they feel that they've arrived in their mental development, their physical development. Maybe they've lost a certain amount of weight, their nutrition, their mental health. They figure they've arrived financially when they hit a certain goal, and they sit back and they camp. And you talked about, had the discussion about our brains and how our brain it wants to be fed. It wants to be constantly fed new information. It wants to be challenged. It doesn't want you to sit back and do the same patterns all the time. And it's easy to see why people slip back into depression, or they slip into anxiety. And money had nothing to do with saving them from it. So all of a sudden they have no financial concerns, but yet people will say, well, why is that person has no reason to be sad? Look how much money they have. So people associate money to happiness or mental stability or happy family life. Oh, things will be better in my life when this happens and I arrive. And I'll tell them, well, why would things be different? What makes you think they'll be different? And try to get them to talk it through with me. And I'll tell them, the biggest problem that you're going to have is sliding back into your old patterns, because your body is wanting to pull you back, just like you were saying. And not enough people are going out there and changing the narrative or the script of what society thinks it should be. And until we can change the biggest associations, which is the media, and it's not just social media, it's television, it's radio, it's all the media that we have. Until we can change that, we're going to have a society that's always going to be subservient to the small percentage of the masses that went out of their comfort zone, that realized they had to change. They realized that there was going to be uncomfortable days where they were miserable, where they'd be crying their ass off or curled in a fetal position, all things that I've experienced myself, feeling quiet desperation and just feeling helpless, like nobody understood me. And then we get that self-limiting beliefs. So we just beat ourselves up so much that, I'm proud to know you now, and that you're out doing things like that to help people change their systemic issues that have been repeating over and over in their lives, and living those lives in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And in reality, their mental growth was stunted when they were 8 or 10 because of some trauma that they never ever understood. And then they live their lives on an emotional front when they're getting challenged at a 10-year level, like they were 10 years old.
Yes.
And people, I talk to people about that. Well, how do you know about that? You're not a psychologist. No, but I've read a lot, and I've been to enough counselors through my kids and the trauma they went through with their mom and other circumstances they've been through. I've learned a lot, and I ask a shitload of questions, and I never apologize for asking questions, right? Because there is stupid questions, but most of the questions that
I have
people
never
ask are
heard anyone say that.
what?
I'm sorry. I had to interrupt.
What's
I
that?
have never heard anyone say, but I love that you said it. There are stupid questions.
Oh, absolutely there is.
No, but I love that you said it, because everybody goes, "There's no stupid questions."
Oh,
But
absolutely.
there are stupid
See,
questions.
here's why I said that, Allison. My
Tell me.
my oldest daughter is 34, and she says to me, Dad, you always taught us there was never a stupid question. And I said, yeah. And then what I start teaching you years later, You only remember that one thing. I told you years later, actually, there is stupid questions because people, have been taught, oh, there's no stupid questions. I've heard some doozy stupid questions.
Tell me one.
And I told my kids, I
Tell me
say,
one. I'll hear it.
you could,
I do. I'm not kidding. How can you say that and not say it? Look, now I'm acting like it's my podcast. I'm so sorry.
that's okay.
I'll be quiet.
You can have me on yours and then you can
I will
ask me whatever.
have you.
But stupid, there's been so many stupid questions, and I'll tell my kids, your whole lives, I've been trying to develop common sense in your life to think about things, to actually, before you open your mouth and remove all doubt, your filter from here. And I'd go in a circle to their mouth. I said, you know what, such and such, and I won't name kids' names. You need to think. And when that thought's there, don't let it come out. Think about, if I say that, what's the outcome going to be? And I said, initially, when you're training your common sense brain, it's going to take you a little bit, but the more you practice that muscle, it's going to be snapping your fingers and you're going to come up with, you're going to be able to critically think. But that whole process takes time from when you're little. And don't think there's no stupid questions, because there's just too many of them, especially in my 18 years of being in finance. Oh my gosh, the amount of dumb questions I've gotten asked. And I'll smile and they'll say, oh, I hope that's
ask your question.
And people will say to me, well, they'll look at me, and I've had to develop a poker face. Oh, that's not a stupid question, is it? No, that's fine. If that's the question you have, let's go over it. And when I'm thinking to myself, you're a grown adult in your 30s or your 40s, and you'd actually ask that question, like, just because
I'm personally insulted, because I'm probably one of those people who would ask one of those financially retarded. Oh
no, it's not the financial stupid questions. They're just asking questions about generalities. It's not even necessarily finance. I'm talking just life questions. I'm not talking finance. There's no, on a finance scale, there's no stupid questions. I tell my clients that, because you know what? They're not supposed to remember what I know. They're supposed to ask, okay, it's been a year since we reviewed your stuff, Alison. What questions do you have? Well, you talked about this last year, and I kind of remember it, but I kind of don't. Would you mind going over it again? That's not a stupid question. Right. Or, I had a friend tell me this was a better scenario for me to do this. Right. Yeah. And it's something I've already discussed with them multiple times, but every year or every 6 months, they forget about it. So how is that a stupid question? It's not a priority in their thought process for it to have an index in their brain to always remember that answer. So I'm the catalyst. Here's how we find this information in your brain. I'll start talking about it and they'll go like it's a light bulb. Oh, I remember that now. Okay, we don't have to go over it. Sometimes I don't even have to finish. I just need to help them index the information I've taught them in the past. So no, there's no dumb finance questions, but on the life questions, there's lots of stupid ones.
Let me tell you something. Is it okay? I just have to do this. Okay. So the thing about, you're talking about questions. I ask questions for a living. That's like what I do.
So do I. Yeah.
Questions,
so do I.
Right. So do you, of course.
Yeah.
So this is like, and this idea of being awake, right? This idea is really when somebody is, let's say they're just following those core beliefs, right? But they just, I shouldn't say they, just collectively human beings are following blindly things that are just in the background because they've always been there. They just don't even notice. They just become real. So it's almost like my job, your job too. Both of us, what we're doing is we're asking people to turn around. Like, look at your life, look at yourself. Like, is that actually true? Like, does that, like, I actually go with people into that memory of their childhood and like, we'll stand at the door of their bedroom. Let's say something happened in their childhood and I'll say, so that child's believing that and you're still believing that. But when you and I look at that as two adults, how would we reframe that? What is actually true? And we don't stop to really reconsider. We just believe things and we don't even make a decision to say, oh, you know what? I get to decide how I live my life. I get to decide how I think, how I feel. You know what? I love that. I'm sure you've heard this so many times. I think his name is Alvin Toffler, when he says that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write. They will be the ones who cannot learn, unlearn, and learn again. And I feel like that's so true about us. We learn, just by the stuff that's just coming in. We don't have, if we don't have parents who are filtering, like we were talking about, and just all this is coming into our mind. And so all of that neurological, that blueprint is there. So that's what we learned. The truth helps us to look at it and make a decision about if we want to follow that anymore or not. Right.
Yeah.
And then, so that's the unlearning. And then learning again is almost like, so when that thought comes, we have a choice in that moment, that negative thought, to like pivot away from the thought. Like it almost feels weird because you feel like you're lying to yourself, and then create a new thought. So it's like,
well, and then like you said, though, our bodies want to pull us back, and
yep,
and it goes back to the fact of associations. If you have the right associations, then you can sit and let's say you and I are on a Zoom call or we're in a mastermind together. I can
yep,
say, Allison, this is what I've been trying to change, and I know it, but yet I keep on getting pulled back. And
yep,
and we end up being accountability partners to one another to remind ourselves, you may not be able to give me the right answer, but you're going to remind me why I've been doing it. Well, Dwight, I get where you're at. You've been having trouble sleeping, or you've been grasping and struggling with your past. And now you're interjecting this new thought process, this new habit. It takes time. And even after you've developed that habit, if you associate with the wrong things, it's like a magnet. It's just going to try pulling you back into that
yep,
negativity. It could be 6 months, 8 months, a year, 10 years.
yep.
So you're a work in progress. You constantly have to work at keeping your state sharp. You got to feed it with your brain with the right things. And most people don't, just like dieting. They get into nutritional changes and diets. And really, I believe it was you that said in that one podcast that dieting really isn't a thing.
I don't work.
Yeah, they don't work. But yet
No.
here's what I'm going to, because my listeners already know, I'm over 3.5 years now successfully doing a keto lifestyle. It's not a diet
I
for
heard
me.
that.
It's a nutritional lifestyle. I started in November of would be November of 2017. I started a keto lifestyle. I understand the differences between that. Carbs are not bad. I don't follow, too many people drink the Kool-Aid and they do nutritional lifestyle changes, and air quotes for the listeners. They don't do it properly. And in order for me to stay on track, it's about tracking. It's about understanding the differences in how nutrition works with the macros. And, when I listened to that today and I heard you say that diets don't work, you're right, because I've been on calorie counting diets. I've been on all these different type of diets my whole life to stay structured, because I was following somebody else's blueprint. So once I realized what I wanted to do, what I wanted to accomplish, and I started reading the different types of nutritional lifestyle changes and understanding how to eat properly, it took a while. It was a progress, right? But I had to adapt it to me, to who I am, and not have a cookie cutter approach to, just like exercise. One form of exercise routine doesn't work for everybody.
No,
And
nothing.
diets, and neither does nutrition. Mental health's the same way,
Yep. We're
right?
snowflakes. We are snowflakes.
Have you seen some of the websites you can go to where they have researchers? They've never found two snowflakes the same ever in history.
That's why I'm saying it.
Yeah. But I'm making sure that the listeners get that, though, why you're bringing that up.
100% snowflake. Isn't that the most amazing
It's like
thing?
our fingerprint, very unique.
Yes. And you know what? I always think of, like, the first snowflake that falls is not any less than the last snowflake that causes the avalanche.
Yeah.
Like, it's just amazing how we're trying so hard to not be that unique, unbelievable thumbprint or,
Snowflake. Yeah. Whereas I want, what? As a last note, because this usually comes up when I'm interviewed, I always taught my kids, you never want to be normal in life. Why, Dad? I want to be like such and such, or that person, or that person. Oh, you want to be them, or do you want to be unique? I'd sooner you tell people that my dad, and I've had parents question me as they were growing up, such and such said you told them they should be abnormal, they should be strive to be abnormal. Why would you tell them that? Why wouldn't you want them to? Because I said, I don't want my kids to conform to what every other person in that school is like, or their classroom. How do I know that their parents have proper lessons, that their parents are teaching them the wrong things, that they're not going home to an alcoholic addicted home or an abusive home, or list goes on. So what makes their normal the normal? Because you say it's the normal? I teach my kids the difference between needs and wants since they were little. They understand the needs of budgeting. They understand the needs of always being kind. And don't you dare be kind to somebody to manipulate them. You be genuine about your kindness. If the kindness gets you something, great. If it gets you something that feeds back your words of affirmation, great. If it gives you so that somebody says, oh, your kid's so cool because they said this or did this for me, and they give you a chocolate bar, great. But never have an expectation that being kind and being thoughtful or working with people to help them level up and be a better version of themselves isn't worthwhile. Because if you look at it the right way, a servant mentality is feeding you, and you're going to continue to evolve. You're going to continue to push away the negative associations. It'll become easier and easier, and your brain will start rewiring itself, or it already has been rewiring itself, to have that attractiveness to where people want to be around you, to where you speak your energy and your tonality. All of a sudden, that person, they literally leave, they smile, they look over their shoulders and they smile and wave at you, and they're maybe 10 feet away. Why are they doing that? Because they can't wait to see you again. They're sad that they're leaving. Why? Because you fed them what they needed. You fed them one of their love languages. That's another favorite book of mine. I've read it
Oh, I know. I love
five
it too.
times.
Can I comment on one thing? I know you want to
Sure.
go. Should I
Go
just
ahead.
not?
Go ahead.
When you said about being normal, as a therapist, so many people come in and they're like, well, is this normal? Because they're worried. And I'm like, you better hope it's not normal.
Yeah.
Because the norm, the norm is just dulling. It's like,
is
it's keeping everyone
subservient.
totally, and not having their spark. You know how like an apple tree, like I always think of this like a seed for an apple. It's like packed with so much information. It's fascinating to me, and I feel like we're like that. Like if you plant it in the ground, you don't even know what you can't tell what it is, but all the information's in there. And I feel like that's all this stuff is in our DNA, the spark. And so much of our surroundings are keeping us from being what's already the little instruction pack that's inside of us, our divine nature, like what our excellence is. And I think the thing that keeps us there is that instead of having an internal locus of control, we have an external locus of control. So it's like so basically it's like not being emotionally sober, because if I'm reacting to all the people, places, things, circumstances around me, and they're determined, like I have something going on inside of me, but now I'm tinkering out here to fix it with people, with places,
Your associations. Yeah.
and just all of that, we lose. And yes, of course, you shouldn't be in the wrong associations. I didn't mean to negate that, but I'm just saying, like, when we go inward to what's happening with us emotionally, and we resolve that first, like, wait, well, how come I feel so angry, or how come I feel so anxious? And you go in and you ask yourself, and then you find that core belief and you say, well, is that actually true? Before you react to that other person, you want to be clear, so then you can have a healthy conversation, or you can decide not to be with them.
Yeah.
But
I totally agree.
we spend so much time reacting. Even you see it everywhere in politics. Everybody's reacting to everything.
And
All the time.
you talk about reaction, and the reason I smiled so much when you talk about the apple tree, as I actually educate and teach around an apple tree and the seeds, and how
I love that.
that I have for a long time. I do it right within finance, and I explain to them, the apple, the seed is the same for everybody, but when you put a seed in the ground, and it has to be nurtured. It has to have a good amount of sunlight. It has to have nutrients in the soil. It needs water. You are a seed. Every child has the same greatness within inside of them. Their family waters them, feeds them a certain way, gives them certain nutrients a certain way, feeds their mindset a certain way, and that child develops that way, right?
Yes.
Now all of a sudden you can have an apple tree, the same thing. It's not dealt with right, and it's just a little scraggly apple tree. Gets, if no apples or a few apples, or then you'll see this apple tree that's just flourishing and it's full of apples, and they're literally hanging and about to drop off because it's so developed and it's been fed correctly and taken care of, nurtured properly. Human beings are like that too. You can have a family that nurtures their child and their kid, and that kid runs with it and grows up to be an amazing adult human being. And then another kid doesn't have that same thing, and they grow up to be a little shit, and they are not a productive part of society. But then on the flip side, I've seen it where kids have been in a completely shit environment where they weren't fed right, and they ended up being like a scholar and one of the best people to serve society. Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, it is what it is. It sometimes the norm can be broken, and that person, that child, seen their struggle. And I heard that from you when you were talking about your story
Yeah.
about needing neglected. You made a conscious choice sometime in your life, whether it was somebody that seen the seed of greatness in you and started watering it so that Alison can grow into the
Yeah.
beautiful, productive servant that you are today of others, right? But that might not have happened. You had to have wanted it. That
Hmm.
environment you were in maybe disgusted you, if that's the wrong word, I'm sorry, or it didn't resonate with you, or somebody grabbed your hand and said, Alison, you're awesome. You can do great things. Maybe a youth group, or maybe it was an extracurricular activity. I don't know what it was. We'll have to have another podcast to go through that. But as a side note, it's the apple tree thing is amazing because it is so true, right? Things grow
Yeah.
differently based on nutrients, water, you know, are they getting enough sun? Human beings, are we getting enough positivity? Are we getting enough? I always taught my kids this too, since we're on this train. I'm going to finish this now. I talk to my kids. They'll say, Dad, how did you get away with telling to somebody critical? And I'll say, well, number one, in my client base, in my family base, and everything that I do, I try to listen. I try to build that relationship. I try to key on certain things and feed you positive things, so that into your emotional bank, into your mental bank, so that when I need to be critical, I can take a withdrawal without crushing you. Right. So I always want to put more into you, more into my clients, so that when I need to be critical, or for them to change what they're doing. For when you kids were little, change what you're doing. You may not have realized what I was doing, but I always make sure I was giving you more, even if it was an immediate circumstance, you did something wrong. I'd hear the story out, and you just don't realize it. Maybe you will now. I'd say, oh, this happened, this happened, this has happened. I'd talk about the positives and leave the negative as the withdrawal at the end, so that your energy levels weren't so depleted that when I start with the negative and I sit and berate you, or I raise my voice, or I ground you, or I don't have a conversation, I haven't helped you develop as a little human being that I want to become a productive adult. Now, is that always going to work? And I just told one of my daughters this a couple nights ago. We were on the phone for a couple hours. I said, you know what? It's not going to always work when you're dealing with my grandkids, right? All you can do is give them the tools, just like I give you tools. And then your toolbox, when you left my home, you used certain tools differently than I would, and your outcome was different. But you
Mhm.
still learned, and maybe you went back and started using that tool the proper way, because all of a sudden a light bulb popped on. Oh my gosh, Dad was right. Oh my gosh, I remember years ago, Dad said that would happen if I did this. How come I didn't remember that? Well, because that's called life lessons. Your mistakes are not your definition, your defining moment, unless you choose to live by that mistake. I teach my kids and my clients and friends and family, including myself, every mistake I have, I look at it and I think, what did I do to create that mistake? I don't want to point the finger at others. I can say, well, that person helped enhance me making that big mistake, but it was still my onus and my choice. Now that mistake is my life lesson. And how am I going to take now that life lesson and mold it and shape it into the wisdom that I'm going to share with others and say, you know what, Alison, I can totally understand what you're talking about. And here's what I found. In these circumstances, I've gone through this and this was the outcome and I felt really crappy. And I hear where where your life is at. And, maybe you can relate with, I'll continue to share with them and I'll tell them more specifics and that vulnerability helps them relax. I watch their body language and their shoulders go down. They're leaning forward a little bit because they want to be closer to me and the conversation. And all those little things has taught me to be a better person, to take my mistakes, my life lessons and the wisdom and continue to help others level up, because by helping them level up, it increases my internal energy. It helps me feel better. It helps reiterate those lessons over and over again and the habits I've developed so that I don't slip backwards into that quiet desperation. And those days when I do slip into quiet desperation, I time myself out and I go to specific things to trigger and change my state, because I owe it to everybody in my life to be the best version of myself every single day. And the number one person I owe it to is myself, the person I look at in the mirror, because God created me to be the best version of myself so that I can serve others, not to be an entitled, selfish prick. Oh, sorry. But,
Oops.
That's okay. I got an E rating on my podcast intentionally because I've had guests on that just get into rants and I don't care.
Oh, you do?
We are. Thank you so much, Alison. This conversation has been unbelievable. For the listeners, this is going to be the first time since I've started the podcast that we're going to have a second part. So this is going to be part one of the two-part series of, this awesome, fantastic conversation with Alison. There's so much more things yet that I want to cover. So stay tuned. You'll have part two next week. And I know you're going to love it as much as you've loved part one. So thanks so much. Give a heck, keep on following, listeners. We will, catch you next week on part two. And in part two, we'll give you the information on how to reach out and be able to contact with Alison at that time. Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together, let us all strive to give a heck.